GPs epitomise the NHS for us all, supporting us from cradle to grave like no other part of the NHS. And although they represent 90% of a patient's experience of the NHS, they're getting less than 10% of the budget. So to better understand these issues, I've spent recent months meeting with doctors and practice managers, but I also spent a morning shadowing a GP at Walford Mill Surgery in Wimborne to see the reality of their life firsthand. And I want to thank Dr. Wright and every patient who kindly allowed me to observe what were often deeply personal and distressing consultations. What I witnessed was high-quality, compassionate care, and despite a busy schedule, the GP took time to liaise with hospitals, arrange tests, write referrals, and fully support his patients. And almost every patient was supported with more than they arrived to discuss. He sensitively raised worrying comorbidities with them and encouraged them to come back and encouraged them to think about their wider life. And I really could not fault the care that he gave. Which brings me to the issue about the appointment times. So we know that the BMA recommends 15-minute appointments for GPs, but most surgeries only allow 10, but typically try and get away with 5. And there is no way you can look after people on that time, particularly with the emotional connection that these GPs are making with their patients and having to go from 1 minute telling a patient that they've got cancer to the next minute comforting a new mum who's worried about the health of her baby. How does a doctor download their own emotions in between, particularly when they're dealing with the financial pressures and their own home lives as well? GP surgeries are also struggling with having to do things that they weren't designed to do and not being reimbursed properly. So one of the issues I witnessed was the reimbursement of blood tests. So they've recently negotiated a contract with NHS Dorset, and NHS Dorset not only didn't agree with the amount that the GP said they needed, but they cut it dramatically. And the GPs are being reimbursed at 25% of the actual cost to them, personally subsidising every blood test that they undertake in a drive to push those blood tests to the hospitals where the patients do not want to be, cannot get, and is quite distressing for them. It's in the patient's best interest for those blood tests and things to be taken locally. On the flip side, NHS Dorset's pathway for cancer means that the follow-up investigations, including some very personal examinations, are having to take place at a GP surgery with a GP that does not know the patient, rather than going to the hospital and starting their cancer journey with people who actually know about cancer. And I found that quite worrying and distressing. The other issue that I experienced was the discrepancy between the electronic systems used by GPs and the paper systems used by doctors, so doctors in hospitals, where letters were still being sent out by post, causing delays and additional administration in surgeries, and bizarrely, paper prescriptions being issued by hospitals, meaning that patients weren't able to leave the hospital and get their prescription elsewhere, and in a rush to get their family member home, were then having to go back into the GP and get a new prescription, creating more and more delay and unnecessary work for the GPs. I want to give you some examples that perhaps the government can help, and I'm grateful to the Minister because he has replied on one of these cases. It may be familiar to him. And one of those is the case of Wareham Surgery, where the GPs are all partners and they are working out of a building that was part of a hospital and an ambulance station. And the building is falling down. The hospital was going to be rebuilt. That was planned a long time ago. And now they have finally found a new building for them to move into. Unfortunately, that building comes with a 25-year lease, which extends beyond even the most youthful of partners. And it comes with a requirement, and there's no break clause, and it comes with a requirement that there must be at least 3 GP partners. And if there are not, then retiring GPs will remain personally liable until there are. Now, what we're finding in all of these surgeries, both in Wimborne and Wareham, is that People don't want to be a partner anymore. They can't afford to. And my niece is a GP. She's Bethan's in her early 30s, and she's probably got over £100,000 worth of debt to get where she's got. She's probably got a £250,000 mortgage because she lives on the south coast. How on earth can she be expected to take personal unlimited liability on top of that as a young woman? And so more of them are becoming salaried GPs, and as salaried GPs they're working their socks off in clinical terms, but they don't have any of the burden of running the organisation and taking that responsibility and subsidising other patients. And so these GPs are really struggling to be able to find people willing to be a partner so that they can take up this lease. And what I didn't get back from the Minister was any real reassurance or understanding of the nature of being a GP is changing, and what is the government doing? Are we expecting the GP partner model to be phased out, and if so, what's going to replace it, and how do we make sure that these organisations can remain? What bothered me most was something that was said to me by the Chief Executive of NHS Dorset, who said, GPs are independent contractors and they are responsible for sorting out their own businesses. And I find it absolutely appalling that we treat our GPs as if they are the local carpenter. They are the heart of our community and they are heart of our NHS, and we need to start talking about them as an integral part, not as an independent business that needs to make money. These people are not making money, they are saving our lives and they are keeping us well, and I think we need to be treating them much better. Finally, Madam Chair, in Wimborne people are worried about the doubling of the size of the town's population, but they've actually lost a GP surgery, and they're constantly writing to say we need another surgery. The surgery wants to expand, and most surgeries want to expand, but one of the problems that we're facing with the funding model that GPs can access, and I'd be grateful if this can be looked at, is a requirement to bid, design, obtain planning and build within a financial year. Now, Madam Chair, I'm sure that even with the best will in the world and the most efficient planning system, there may be some tiny little district that can do that, but I don't know anywhere that can do that whole process in a year. And so we need to find a way where somebody can access funding over multiple years so that communities know that they've got an NHS fit for the future. I will end on that note, and I look forward to the Minister's comments.